this is part 2 of our cross contour still life project for 7th grade. Just a couple things that I want you to double check on your drawing is to make sure that your objects are overlapping each other in your picture. So what we don't want to see is, so if I am looking again here at this still life, what I don't want to see, okay, so I see my tin can. I'm going to draw that on my paper. I see that there is a pear. I see there's a basket. I don't want to draw them where they are all right just in a line of each other, because that's not what's happening on here. So by doing this and then having maybe our apple over here or whatever, okay, you're telling me that what you are seeing is that it looks just like this. Okay, that's not the case here. So we want to make sure that we draw it where the objects are overlapping each other. Our pear is over top of the basket. The apple is actually on top of the tin can, not next to it. Okay. Other things that I want you to also look at, which people make this mistake all the time, is so our apple is sitting on top of our tin. So if I'm drawing my apple and I actually end up drawing it right here, okay, here's my apple. Right now, you're also now telling me that your apple is floating and hovering above your tin can. Here's why, it's because you can see the whole bottom part of your tin can. The apple is not covering up any part of that. So you're telling me your apple is kind of sitting here like this, hovering. We want to make it and draw it so your apple is actually sitting on that tin can. So this would be your whole apple. See how we're covering part of that part of the tin can up? Make sure before you move on to the final steps that, one, you aren't just drawing your objects one right next to each other. Two, none of your objects are floating. And three, we want overlap. We want to see overlap. So here's my kind of finished product here. Again, you're doing yours in pencil. I have mine in markers just so you can see it a little better. So I drew really big. I used my entire paper. I have my 4 objects and anything else that I see. I added my cross contour lines. They are going the right direction. And I also added some shading. Okay, remember that shading is going the same direction that the first lines you put on that object. They're just shorter, and wherever that shade is. Okay, don't forget this part. Okay, the final part, what I'm going to have you do, so when you are finished actually drawing it, you are going to get oil pastels. And they're in these little baggies here. They're on the shelf behind me. What you'll notice is, so this is a yellow. Definitely doesn't look like a yellow. It's very contaminated because it's in a big bag of all different colors. So what you're going to want to do is actually grab a scratch piece of paper and rub all that color that is not yellow off of the oil pastel before you put it on your paper. So rub all of that stuff off so that it actually looks yellow now. And that's what came off. Okay? So you don't want all that contamination on your actual drawing. So rub it all off first. Okay, second thing that I want you to think about is we want each object to be about 2 colors. Okay, you're going to have a lighter color and a darker color. So such as our apple. So my apple's at the very top here. I'm going to take a light green and a dark green oil pastel. I'm going to do the base of my apple the light green. because it is basically light green. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to go right over top of the lines that I have in pencil, and I'm going to trace right over top with my green. Okay, see that? I just drew right on top of the lines. We're not going to color in like a coloring book. I don't want you to do that. Okay, so once I have that base color done, I'm going to take my dark green and I'm going to go over those short lines, which are my shadows, on the bottom of my apple. Hold it a little closer so you can see the colors. Okay, so the dark green and then the light green is the main part of the apple. Okay, so we're going to try that again here. My tin can is gray, so I have a gray oil pastel and I have a black oil pastel. The main color is my gray, so I'm going to go over top of those lines that I already have. I'm not filling it in and coloring it in. Also, something to think about, be careful. Oil pastels get all over your fingers, and you don't want to have fingerprints all over your paper either. So if you need to periodically wash your hands, you certainly can. Okay, so I covered up my lines with the gray. I'm going to go back with my black and only go where my shadow is, my shadow lines. And fill them in. Same up to the top. Alright, so I have my gray, I have my black for my shadow, 2 colors for each object. So what I could do for my pear is I could have an orange and maybe a yellow. That would work. An orange and a yellow. Your orange would be your shadow because orange is darker than yellow. Okay, so then again, I'm just going right over top of my lines that I already have. Your paper, if for some reason you cannot find 2 different shades of color, so like a light blue and a dark blue, so like my paper here, let's say I only could find this blue, what you're going to do is you're just going to go right over top of those lines. Then you're going to go back with the same color over top of your shadow lines. It'll still look darker even though it's the same color because you're filling in more of the white space. Okay, so same color, but it looks darker because of the less white between each line. So that is a possibility, but I would prefer if you could find 2 different colors for each object. Okay, so one last thing. So my orange would be my shadow for my pear, and my yellow would be the base color of my pear. And I'm just drawing right over top. I'm not coloring in. And you're going to cover each object with 2 colors. Once you are finished with this, double check, make sure your name's on the back. You will need to keep your 2 rough drafts. And I have a grade sheet that I would like you to also do, which I'm going to grab real quick here for you. This is what our grade sheet is going to look like. So your name's going to go at the top. This first part, which is going to be worth 30 points, 10 is the best, 1 is the worst. This is for your 2 rough drafts. Read it, do the student section, not the teacher section, that's for me. Figure out how well you think you did. This bottom part is for your final copy. So how well you think you did, 10's the best, 1's the worst. Total at the bottom, out of 80, this is 80 points. Once you have finished this and this, you can turn it in. This is going to be on top. Your rough draft is going to be stapled to the middle, and then your good copy is on the back. And I'll write that up on the board too. So, and we're going to staple on the top left corner. So we have our rubric, our grading sheet, our rough draft, and then our good copy on the back. Then hand it in. When you're done with that, you can do your sketchbook or other homework. Good luck.